Welcome to the next episode of the Wild, Wild World of Mead, also known as our Rosemary Hydromel. This thing is weird. It is just unusual. The first thing you'll notice when you look at it is it's got like a yellowy croissant, which at first worried me a little bit, but when we looked into it, it seemed like it was okay. Then it's got like these little floaty bits. And, well, I have heard people mention the smell of fermentation in their house being like that of human off-gassing, you might say. I've never actually experienced it that way before. Not the human off-gassing part, the smell of the brew part. And this was like the first one that I did. It smells really, really weird. When you sniff the airlock, which, you know, we all sniff our airlocks. Just let's get over that right now. But anyway, I wanted to take a reading on this and find out how it's doing. So, right away, we started this on June 3rd. So this is going on almost 5 weeks, okay? It's not even all that old. It started at 1.058 gravity. It is intended to be a low ABV mead that we haven't quite decided if we're going to make it sparkling or if we're just going to pasteurize it or what we're going to do with it or if it's going to stay dry. We just don't know. So what I want to do is take the lid off and take a reading, see how it's doing. Give it a hello. How are you? Who's that? Ha! Now, at this point, we could also rack off the rosemary, but I don't know. I'd kind of like to leave it in there a while. Oh, wow, that is some clear mead. Oh boy, for as young as this is, that's amazing, especially for a wild fermentation. But right about now, Derica should be making some funny faces because of that smell.
It is unusual.
Oh, it's unusual because I'm not that kind of guy, but
Okay, I'll say it. It doesn't smell like farts.
not exactly.
It smells like a combination of rosemary and
Rotten eggs.
cooked eggs. I wouldn't say rotten eggs.
Yeah.
When we were first working with it, it did kind of smell like rotten eggs, and that was unpleasant. But now I'm definitely getting more of the rosemary odor.
Good news and bad news. Good news is, I think it's actually okay. Wow. Get close to it and smell it. It's pure rosemary honey.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful smell. So I think it's just a weird sensation of the rosemary with some other gases in there making that odd smell. Up close, smells great. I do not want to taste this yet, though, because it's only gone down by 18 points. It's at 1.040. Now, am I worried about that? No, look at this smile. When I look nervous, you can get nervous, okay? This is perfectly fine. It is fermenting. Wild ferments take time. Paul Allerston, I think I said that right? The S is before, yeah. One of our mods and a good friend of ours has said he has wild ferments that have taken over a year to finish out. Okay, so this is at 5 weeks. I'm not worried. 18 points. That means if it keeps going at this rate, it'll be down to like a 1.010 or so in like another 8 weeks. So at this point, what do? Cap it. Put it back under the desk. Put it in a dark place. Put it wherever you want that's not going to be in direct sunlight. And that isn't like, you know, too hot or too cold. Ours is room temperature, 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And that seems to work well for us. Being that this is a wild ferment, we don't really know what it's going to do yet. Okay, that's why the end result of this is still a little up in the air because it's a wild product. It's a living thing. We just don't know where it's going to go. And, you know, we didn't teach it to read, so it doesn't know the rules. Therefore, we're just going to let it do its thing, and then we will rein it back in at the end and figure out how we're going to end up with a final product. So here we are about 5 weeks later, and we're going to give a check on this, see where it's at. Last time it was at 1.040, and it's been sitting. Swirled a bit. I haven't swirled it in a little while because I wanted it to clear up. I have noticed there are some floaters in here. What I mean by that is the yeast likes to stick onto the rosemary, and it's starting to fall off now. So I think we might be nearing completion if we're not actually done yet. It's nice and clear. It smells pretty good too. Remember, this is the one that smelled kind of funny. It looks like it fermented down some more from last time. Let me check. I see a lot of effervescence in there. There's a lot of carbonation. It's down to 1.010. Now, it's a judgment call at this point. I could rack this, put it right back in there, get rid of the rosemary and the lees, and see what it does. We could wait another week and see if it goes down. I'm guessing at this point, I'm going to call it. I'm going to say it went 30 points in 5 weeks, but it's at 1.010. I don't think it's going to go much further. The pressure had kind of balanced out in the airlock, so I think it's close. This is one of those times that it's a judgment call. Is it fully done? Probably not, but I'm okay with racking it today. All right, so we're ready to rack this. And the reason we're using a pitcher today is because we're going to put it right back into this container because we've run out of containers to put stuff in. But this is actually at 6.5% right now, which it's a hydromel. It's meant to be a lower alcohol volume. So it's right on par for what I was hoping for. And there's a lot of gas in there. There is not, however, a lot of lees on the bottom, which is kind of interesting. So I'm going to put this all the way to the bottom and let it run because I know, well, I just stirred some up. Now, something we might do before we put this back in is I want to do the tasting of it just to see where it's at because at 1.010, that's kind of on the dry side. We may not appreciate it, so I might end up back sweetening it a little bit. Not much wasted all this time. Okay, so we've racked it to a pitcher, and the reason for that is for two reasons. One, because it has to go back into here, and two, because if I have to back sweeten, it's a lot easier to stir it up in here than it is in there. So first, let's give this a little bit of a taste. It's really interesting. It almost has a rosemary gingery smell. It's not pure rosemary. It's really interesting. It's far different than it was a little while ago.
Yes, yes.
Before
it was...
We were concerned.
We had concerns.
I forgot my hat.
Oh no. But yes, it smells much better now.
Yeah, go ahead and give that a taste. It's also pretty clear. I did get a little bit of lees at the bottom there because I was trying to get as much out as possible.
It is very dry, but rather than having that astringent
it's not
dryness,
that sour
it's
dry.
More of a crisp, clean
Yeah,
dryness.
it's very light. Very.
It reminds me of a soda, like a ginger ale or
So let me ask you, do you think we need to do anything to this?
I don't.
I'm kind of tempted to not do anything and just put it back into rack it and let it age for a little while.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. At 1.010, I never would have thought that I'd appreciate it at all. I mean, it's a hydromel. It's a very light mead. It doesn't have the strong flavors or anything like that. It's almost, I mean, I hate to say watery, but it kind of is because that's just the way they are.
Yeah. Now, I'm actually happy that this is the decision we've come to because we did see a lot of gas in there.
Oh, yeah.
And since we haven't made it to the safety zone of 10% ABV, where we know that the likelihood of creating vinegar is limited, this pleases me that we didn't have to back sweeten it because that would have stirred up the gas. So
yeah, we would have degassed it by mixing it.
So now we're not degassing it, so the likelihood...
Just we'll have a blanket.
Yeah, we'll have the blanket, so we probably won't create vinegar.
Though I think we're going to end up filling this jar pretty full.
Yeah.
I don't think too much headspace is going to be an issue this time. I'm really pleasantly surprised. This was one of those, hey, let's just grab some rosemary from the backyard, put it in with some honey and see what happens. And it fermented. It took longer than expected, but it came out with a really nice end product.
Yeah.
I'm very surprised, very pleasantly surprised.
And if you follow along and do this as well, and you experience similar things that we did, you will see our hesitation and our concern along the way because the yeast collected on the rosemary and
I'd heard that it would do that.
Strings,
but when you see it, you go,
really, like, is that right?
Yeah.
And then the smell that accompanied it was like...
When I would swirl it up, I would have to say, it wasn't me.
And then the first time that we had experienced that with a brew. We've heard lots of people saying, "Oh, I can't brew in the house because my wife gets angry and says it
Or my
stinks."
neighbors complain.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
like,
just
your
like,
neighbors?
what the heck are
Our
you
neighbors
doing?
have no idea what we do in here.
So this is the first one where we've had that unusual, unpleasant odor.
The only thing I could attribute it to is I think many people are maybe at a higher temperature or a much lower temperature, so they're stressing the yeast more. I think yeast choice plays a large part, and a lot of the time we're using 71B or we're using wild yeast like this. And the wild yeast, this is its environment. This rosemary grew in our backyard.
Yeah.
The honey was Florida honey, so this stuff is from here, which is probably why it worked out as well as it did. But it was a little dicey for a couple of weeks there. All right, so we racked it off. We're putting the lid and an airlock back on purpose because this is still degassing. We want to let that happen. Now, a word about headspace. It's up to about here. It's about a ½ inch lower than I really like. I really like it to be just up into the shoulder, at least. Closer is better. But here, based on the amount of gas we saw in there, I'm okay with that because this is going to degas. And I can even just prove that to you right now. Watch this. Look at that airlock. See how it dropped immediately down? It's going to bubble. So there's proof that watching an airlock doesn't mean it's fermenting. This is done. It's not fermenting.
Degassing.
Yep, it's degassing. So this is going to go sit for probably a few weeks. There's a little bit of floaties in there. There was random bits of yeast that were floating. I want all that to fall out, see if this will clear up for me a little bit, and we'll be back with an update then. All right, so we racked it. It's been tested. It should be done. It was a 1.010 last time we saw it, and we racked it because I felt, it was time. So we're going to do another quick test on it today just to make sure nothing's changed and make sure it's safe to bottle. And that's an important thing. Safe to bottle. Too many people are telling us, oh, I bottled this after like a week, or this one was really crazy. Somebody made ginger beer, and they literally mixed it up and bottled it within an hour. And they couldn't understand what I was talking about when I said it was dangerous. Like I said, uncap those bottles now, because fermentation in a closed container, it's going to explode. There is no two ways about that. Little fizzy. 1.010, exactly like it was before. So it has not changed. That's a good thing. All right, so I want to pour this out because we're going to keep it, and I'm going to pour it into a pitcher. We are actually going to rack directly to a pitcher. All right, so I poured this into a pitcher because normally we could bottle right from this fermenter. There's not a lot of lees in there, but those bubbles coming up, the carbonation, that tells me this needs to be degassed. We haven't done that in a while. Haven't had to because most things have sat long enough that they naturally degassed on their own, and we didn't worry about it. This one needs it. So obviously, put it on something of elevation. You take your auto siphon, you make sure the other end is in the pitcher. I'm going to go about halfway down just to not disturb whatever lees we do have, and start it up. Now, I can probably just let this sit all the way to the bottom. I'm just a little cautious of moving it around too much in there due to it falling around. Like I said, there's just a little fine layer of lees in the bottom of this, so I'm not too concerned. I mean, even if that whole amount got in, it's not going to be a big deal. This is pretty clear, though, so I'd like to keep it that way. Something of note. A lot of people seem to think that because this is fizzy now and carbonated that you can bottle it that way and keep the fizz. While in theory, you can. My worry is that a lot of the gases that are actually produced during carbonation and fermentation aren't really all that palatable. So adding those bubbles to the brew from this perspective is probably not such a great thing. If you do a mild carbonation, like a mild fermentation to create just carbonation, it's a little different. The gases are lighter. It's not as bad. It's mostly CO2. All right. Not a lot of wastage here, but I did pull up a little bit of lees. Always get a little bit. All right, so we put it into a pitcher so that I can degas it. So I'm just going to grab my spoon of unusual size and give it a stir. Now, I don't want to oxygenate, so I want to be a little careful because this is below 10%. This is about 6.5%. So adding too much oxygen could be bad. But we do want to get some of the fizz out. Now, it might end up being just a little bit petulant, as it's called. in the bottle, and that's perfectly acceptable because this is like a cider-ish hydromel, low ABV. Might be nice that way, but I want to get some of the nasty tasting stuff out first. Yep. All right, so to me, that's enough. I don't need to go too crazy with it. Just wanted to get most of it out. Kind of looks like a very light beer, actually. All right, and now we're going to start the bottling process. And to do this, we use a bottling wand. I'm just going to stick it on the tubing about 1/2 inch. And what that is, it has a spring tip there that when you put it into the bottle and push down, it lets the liquid flow. When you lift up, it stops. That way you can go to the next bottle. And Derek's going to hold that for me. I'm going to put this all the way to the bottom because there's no sediment here, right? And we start filling. So we've made an executive decision. Not really the best way to carbonate, but we've decided maybe this is nice petalent and with a little bit of carbonation. So what we're doing is, as soon as I'm done bottling, we're capping it right away to preserve some of that carbonation because there's quite a bit here. I mean, I can see the foam in the pitcher. I'm watching some bubbles. This might actually make it really nice. Be like a cider or a beer even. All right, so we ended up getting 6 and a little over 1/2 bottles. This one will just go in the fridge right away, and we'll just drink it sooner. Derek might drink that like tonight or something. But anyway, this actually was a really neat experiment. Remember, this is a wild fermentation, low ABV. This ended up tasting really nice using rosemary that we grew in our backyard. Kind of cool. And that's what I like about this hobby is you can come up with different flavor combinations and things from what you have around. You know, if it wasn't rosemary, it could have been oregano. It could have been mint. It could have been anything. And I mean, oregano mead. I wonder what that would taste like. Anyway, so what's going to happen with these? They're going to sit at room temperature because we do not need to refrigerate these. It is stable. Now, there's some carbonation in there, but not enough to hurt these bottles. These are beer bottles made for carbonation. Not a problem. If you do this and you have that kind of petalent carbonation, make sure the bottles you use can handle the carbonation. Otherwise, they could explode only because the glass won't be able to handle it. That's why. However, these will stay for years if we let them, most likely, but being lower ABV, I don't really want to let it go that long. Several months should be fine if they last that long. We'll be back with a tasting on this probably in a few weeks for you guys. And if you like this video, we got almost 300 videos on beer, wine, cider, and mead making on our channel.
Thank you for liking and subscribing.
And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.